Hi friends, Ashley from Wildwoods&Homestead. I am going to do a quick video and share how I make chaga and how I ferment it into kombucha. So I start by filling a pot of water with about a gallon of water. I've just been using this pot for years, so I know that just under those little rivets there is about a gallon. I put that on the stove and bring it to a simmer. And while that's coming to a simmer, I'm just going to show you my chaga here. I buy it in a tea grind. And by the way, in one of my last videos, I just shared how I incorporate this chore into my week, as well as talked a little bit about the benefits of chaga and kombucha. So I will put a link to that video in the description for anyone who might be interested. But this is just me briefly sharing how I actually brew the chaga. So here's my chaga, and I pour out about a third of a cup of chaga tea grind. Once my water comes to a boil, more like a simmer, I don't really bring it to a hard boil, but just a simmer, I turn my heat off and then I pour my tea grinds into the water, stir it around, and then I just put the lid back on that and I set it off to the side. You don't want to consume it right away. You want all of those benefits of the chaga to come out into the water. So I just set it off to the side over here next to my kombucha, and I leave it there overnight. The next day, this is what it looks like. It's nice and dark and steeped. And you could just drink it like that. You could add some sugar, some ice, or some honey or something like that. But I'm going to go a step further and ferment it. So I'm going to add 1.5 cups of organic sugar. I add a little bit more organic sugar. Normally it's about 1 cup of sugar per gallon when you're making kombucha. But when I'm doing chaga, I add an extra 1/2 cup of sugar because chaga is very antibacterial, antimicrobial, anti-parasitic, and it just sometimes slows down the process, that fermentation process, and it takes a little bit longer. And I find adding a little bit more sugar just helps to kick start that fermentation process. So once I make sure that all of that sugar is nicely dissolved, I take my kombucha jar there. I've got that really big jar, and I've got some tea in it and some kombucha tea in it, as well as a SCOBY. And I'm just going to strain my chaga that has the sugar in it out into that jar. Now I'm not going to throw away my tea grinds. I'm going to return them to my pot, and I'm going to fill it with some water, and I'll get to that in just a second here. Here's my kombucha. I'm going to let that sit on my counter for about a week. Depending on the temperature, it could take a little bit longer because, like I mentioned, chaga slows the fermentation process down because of all of those wonderful antimicrobial properties, antibacterial properties that it has. So I'm going to set that over on my kitchen counter with a cloth over it to ferment. And then here are my tea grinds, my used chaga. And I'm actually going to return them to my pot, and I'm going to fill that pot about halfway full, so maybe about 1/2 gallon, and I'm going to bring it to a simmer to make a second batch of chaga. You can do this 2 or 3 times. I normally just reuse my chaga tea grinds twice, and then I will just toss the used grinds to my chickens. And you could just drink that or add sugar to it and continue adding it to your kombucha to ferment. This is about a week later, and here is my chaga kombucha. It's all nice and bubbly and fermented, and it kind of has an effervescent vanilla flavor to it. It's really delicious. We have it with our Friday night. We do a Friday night movie night with cheeseburgers, and I try to get a batch of this going so that we always have it for that special night.